Welcome class to Chapter 9, Collecting Data with Forms. This chapter is going to cover 4 objectives or 4 lessons, and they are plan and create a form, edit and format a form, work with form objects, and test and process a form. So this video will cover the very first lesson, which is plan and create a form. A form on a web page will consist of form objects or form fields, and those fields could be input boxes such as a text box or a radio button, a checkbox, a comment box, even a selection box. So those will all be considered form objects, or you can call them form fields. We will label each one of those objects with a form label, such as first name for a text box that's going to collect the user's first name. All forms need to be connected to an application server that will process the information that the form collects. And we'll look at the 2 possible ways that we're going to handle that for this chapter. But the application can store the form data in a database, or it could simply send it to you through an email. When planning your form content, organize the information in a logical order that will make sense to users. So for example, in your book, here is an example of how to plan or sketch out the form you will add. So when you're working with Coffee Shop, I encourage you to do the same thing. Grab a piece of paper, grab some pencil, and go ahead and just kind of jot out what kind of information do you want to collect through your website. The most important information should be on the part of the page that is visible before you have to scroll to see the rest. So if you have a lengthy form, you want to make sure that it's kind of above the fold. Think about a newspaper and how the top half is usually the most important information. The form should have a good contrast between the color of the text and the color of your form background. So to create a form object, we are going to use a new category in our insert panel. So I'm actually going to jump to the exercises for this section just to show you this. So we're going to be working with a data file, DW9_1, and we're going to save this as feedback within your Stripe It Umbrella site. So we'll go ahead and look at design view. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert a form here in this blank area. So on the insert tab, you're going to change your category from the HTML that you've been working with to the form category. And then you're going to go ahead and click on the form object here. Now what you'll receive is a dashed red outline that will represent that this is a form on the page. Now if we look at the code behind it, we'll see that we have a form. It has an ID, name, and method attribute. To make your form usable, you'll need to configure it so that it talks to the scripts or the email server and processes the information the user enters. The form must have a script or program running behind it to process the information users enter so you can gather and use it. 2 methods to process the information is server-side scripting and client-side scripting. So what's the difference between the 2? Server-side scripting uses applications that reside on your web server and interact with the form information collected. So for example, PHP is a server-side scripting language. Client-side means that the user's computer processes the form. The script resides on the web page rather than on the server. So an example of that would be JavaScript. You can process form information several ways. Have the information collected from the form and then emailed. Have the form data stored in a database to be used at a later date. Have the application both collect the form data in a database and send it to an email. have the form data processed instead of stored. You can use the property inspector to specify the application that you want to process the form information and how you want to send it to the processing application. And we'll practice this. The action property is where we're going to practice it. We're going to actually use a JavaScript file that's actually going to process our form information. So we will develop this form by adding the labels in the form objects as we go through later lessons. The method property specifies the hypertext transfer protocol used to send the form data to the web server. So we have two options. We have GET. GET specifies the ASCII data collected in the form will be sent to the server appended to the URL or the file included in the action property. The POST method specifies that the form data should be sent to the processing script as a binary or encrypted file, allowing you to send data securely. When you specify the POST method, there is no limit to the amount of information that can be collected in the form. GET is limited to 100 characters. The form name property will specify and give a unique name to the form. The name can be a string of any alphanumeric characters and cannot include spaces. The target property lets you specify the window where your form data will be processed. And then this talk about CGI. CGI is one of the most popular tools used to collect form data. It can be written in Perl or C. The resulting data is then stored in a database or sent to the email server, and then which then sends the information in an email message to a designated recipient. So let's continue to work with pages 9, 8, and 9, 9. So I'm going to actually go ahead and jump to those pages. Here's the CGI process on a web server. So you'll kind of maybe want to look at that a little bit. Okay, so here's inserting a form. We stepped through, we got the data file, we named it feedback, and we inserted the form. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at the next page. So we're going to set some form properties here. So we are going to name the ID of the form to feedback, and we're going to change this. We're actually going to change this to GET. I know that the instructions say POST, and we know that that's the most secure route. But in order for us to do our action property and use the JavaScript file that I'm going to provide to you, we need to change this to GET. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that process. So I'm going to go back to Design View, and then I'm going to go ahead and open my Properties Inspector. When you click on the dashed red outline, you will get your Properties Inspector to change to your form properties. So we're going to specify this as feedback. And then we're going to change this to GET. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to download a file from your assignments page. And it is called Form Processor. And you're going to be doing this same process. You have a choice with Coffee Shop. You can actually send it to email, or you can do Form Processor. So I'm actually going to click on this file. And then I'm going to go Control U in my browser. And I'm going to copy the script section. So closing script tag up to this opening script tag. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm actually going to save feedback here. And I'm going to go File, Save As. And I'm going to save this as Form Processor.html. Okay, so now I have this feedback file, which has my form in it, and I also have Form Processor, which is the same. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Code, and I'm actually going to remove the form because we don't need the form here. So I'm actually going to take this form tag, and I'm going to remove it, and then I'm going to paste in what I just copied. I'm going to move this script tag all the way to the left margin. Sometimes I do one too many, there we go. And then the middle section right here, between the opening script tag and closing script tag, I'm going to indent. I'm going to indent it about 4. Okay, so that's nice and readable in the code. You're welcome to go ahead and indent other lines if you want to. So this is Form Processor. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. If I go back to Design View, I see that it looks just like it did when we opened up the data file. Now I'm going to specify that for my action, for my form. So I'm just going to go ahead and browse, and I'm going to find Form Processor. So now when we get to later lessons here, we'll actually see this Form Processor in action. But the reason I had you copy the script in here is because I wanted you to keep the same page layout, okay, so that we're in the same site, right? We give them that feeling that we're in the same site, and then we'll give the information back to them in this white area right here. And we'll see that later on. Okay, so that is everything for your lesson 1. Again, make sure you change to get and that you add this Form Processor file. If you have any questions about how to do that process, please let me know. Thank you.